Okay, I've got 9 o'clock. So good morning. My name's Jason Anderson. I'm here, as you can see, with the DCO Office of Accountability. And I want to thank you for joining our monthly rotating topic training today. Today's topic is writing a grant application. As we go along, you'll be seeing links to various resources that you see indicated on the slides. Those will be posted in our chat. So although you can't access them from clicking on the PowerPoint, they will be there. So I would highly recommend copying those at some point towards the end of the presentation. And that way you have the documents for later use and later reference. As some of you may have heard, the session is being recorded, and a copy of that recording will be sent out to everyone that registered. So in this presentation today, I'll illustrate the grant application process, starting out with where to find grant opportunities. I'll explain the portions of the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, which is basically an open call for grant applications. I will talk about the steps you'll take to prepare and apply for a grant. I'll share some important tips for writing the grant application, including the key points that applicants should address. And I will talk about the required documentation, which comprises your grant application, where and how to submit, and I'll explain what a merit review is. Finally, I will wrap up with some tips and resources for answering any questions. So, locating funding opportunities. A couple of options here, as you can see on the screen. So to apply for a grant, you'll first need to know where to find this Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. NOFOs are legal documents that outline the process, eligibility, and goals of grant programs. The DCO Apply for Funding page houses these available opportunities. You can also look for funding opportunities on this Catalog of State Financial Assistance, or CSFA. So the CSFA is a listing of every available funding opportunity across the state of Illinois, all of the agencies. You will find these links in the chat. So here is that DCO Apply for Funding page. It's here that you can locate the funding opportunities that align with the mission of DCO. You can browse program titles, the deadlines for submission, and summaries of the various current opportunities. You can click on a grant opportunity to access additional information, including the funding source, program contact, and award range. If you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll see it contains all the necessary documents for completing the application. You'll see in there a document titled NOFO Supplement. That is the Notice of Funding Opportunity PDF, and it contains all the program information. So this will have things such as eligibility, the requirements of the grant, and if a award is issued to you and your organization, you'll see the responsibilities that come with that award. An alternative location for finding grant opportunities is what's called this Catalog of State Financial Assistance, or CSFA. It's here that you can browse grant opportunities across all of the state of Illinois agencies. So you'll have Department of Transportation, you'll have Department of Natural Resources, all of the different departments there. You'll want to browse the option for current funding opportunities. As we can see in the screenshot here, this page is searchable and it allows you to enter terms or phrases relevant to your inquiry. There's also an option to subscribe to a weekly mailing list, and that will allow you to receive updates on new grant opportunities as they become available. So one email a week, and I highly recommend signing up for that. The link will be posted there in the chat for you. So you can also view a list of the active grant opportunities and browse projects currently accepting applications. You can click on a grant program title to view the additional information such as funding amount, program contact, and where to download that full NOFO supplement that contains all of your information that you want to know about the program in it. Then we have how to read a NOFO. So the NOFO structure is uniform. However, the contents can vary depending on the program. The NOFO contains important information for a particular grant opportunity. So part A of that NOFO discusses the intent of the program. It's here that you'll learn why the state has earmarked funds for the program, as well as the state's expected outcomes. What community does this benefit? What industry does this benefit? Questions like that. Next, if there's any previous history on this grant program, you'll be able to find out about it in this section. For instance, if the governor's office announced a new initiative earlier in the year, this section will discuss the initiative and the goals of the funding. Next, we come to Part B here. So Part B will address which state agency established the grant program and if the grant is state or federally funded. Part B also indicates the projected start date of the grant program and the expected performance period. This can vary, as we said, from program to program. This section will outline the expected individual award amounts and how many grants are expected to be issued. What do I mean when I say that? For example, the overall grant program can be awarding $5 million, but it may intend to award between 100,000 to 200,000 per grantee. This also gives the applicants an idea of how competitive a grant will be. An important item to review is the pre-award costs. This section will address whether the grantee is allowed to start spending grant funds prior to the execution of the grant agreement. So pre-award costs are often unallowable, so please make special note of this section. Next, we come to Part C. Part C, the eligibility information, addresses pre-qualification. Pre-qualification requirements need to be in place prior to applying for and receiving grant funds. I'll be covering pre-qualification in a little bit more detail on a later slide, but just know that this section also outlines the types of organizations that are eligible to receive the award. So please read this section thoroughly. All right, now we've got Part D, application and submission information, identifies the point of contact for the grant program. You may have the need to touch base with this contact if you have specific questions about the grant program. The heading Content and Form of Application Submission in Section D outlines additional required documentation that needs to be submitted. Again, this is something I'll go into a little bit more detail on a later slide. But know that this section identifies the date and time of the submission deadline in addition to where the materials are to be submitted. If an intergovernmental review is applicable, it will be addressed in this section. Section D will cover any grant restrictions. And then if there are any other submission requirements, they will be covered here. Part E, application review information. This will demonstrate how the application materials are going to be reviewed and scored. You're encouraged to use the criteria identified in this section when building your application. Successful applicants use the information provided in this section to outline their entity's abilities within the outlined items. So you're going to have criteria for the program, and the closer you follow that criteria on that application, the better your chances will be. So in this section, you will also find when you can expect to hear the announcement of the state award. But please note that the review time for these grant applications can take months, and the date of award announcement may vary. All right, up next, when the merit review process is complete, those applications that are selected to advance will be invited to proceed to the next step. The next step is the acceptance of the notice of state award. If your grant has any administrative or national policy requirements, they'll be displayed in that notice of state award. Once a grant is awarded, the grantee will be required to complete regular periodic reporting. The grantee will also be subject to monitoring and will be required to complete an annual audit report for every year in which they have expenditures. The grant agreement will contain information about those requirements I just spoke about. Section G of the NOFO. It contains the contact information for the state awarding agency and other information if applicable. So that was how to read that notice of funding opportunity. Now we move on to preparing for a grant. Applicants are required to register their organization in what's known as the GATA Grantee Portal. Now, what do we mean when we say GATA? Well, GATA stands for the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, which is legislation that increased accountability and transparency in the use of grant funds while reducing the administrative burden on both state agencies and grantees. It did this through the adoption of 2 CFR Part 200 or uniform requirements. The GATA Grantee Portal is where grantees will complete grant functions. Now within that portal, grantees can manage organization access, they can find contact information for their cognizant agency, they can take an assessment, elect an indirect cost rate, accept this notice of state award, review pre-qualification status, and upload audits. So they can do a lot in the GATA portal. If this is your first time in the GATA portal, know that there is a GATA new user guide to provide step-by-step instructions in registering. Links for the GATA Grantee Portal and for the GATA New User Guide are provided in the chat. So to create a GATA portal, you'll be visiting illinois.gov/portal. Actually, it's grants.illinois.gov/portal. So you'll have that in the chat there for you. You'll be selecting create an account right there in the middle of the screen. Once an individual user account has been created, you'll be proceeding to tie that account to your entity's portal. So if your entity was not previously registered in GATA, you will return to GATA to begin a first-time organization registration. If, however, your entity was already set up in GATA, you'll only have to request access to your organization's portal. And we do have a video on creating a GATA account for more about that process. To help, I also recommend reviewing the Grantee Portal Frequently Asked Questions. It addresses common issues encountered by grantees, and you see that highlighted on this slide. Also helpful is the GATA Learning Management System. So in partnership with the University of Illinois Springfield, DCO offers a self-paced learning course on navigating and using the GATA Grantee portal. You can learn more about this course by clicking the link in the chat. All right, next up, we're going to move on to the pre-qualification, so stay with me here. Once you have a GATA ID, you'll be able to view and manage your organization's pre-qualification status. The state of Illinois has defined a set of requirements for all organizations that are seeking to receive that grant funding. Entities who wish to do business with the state of Illinois must meet these requirements in order to be deemed qualified and in good standing. Pre-qualification demonstrates that an organization has met all the legal requirements, obtained all the necessary registrations, and demonstrated a track record of compliance. Pre-qualification status must be maintained for the entire span of the grant program. Likewise, it should indicate good standing for your organization to continue to apply for and receive grant funds. A video tutorial on pre-qualification is available on the Grantee Resources page in our video training and resources library, a link to which will be posted there in the chat for you. So let's break this down. Our first item in pre-qualification is SAM.gov. So SAM.gov is the System for Award Management, and that's an official website of the U.S. government. Here, grantees must register to do business with the U.S. government, and registration is required to apply for both federal grants and for state ones also. Through SAM.gov, grantees will receive a unique entity identifier, also known as a UEI. Your UEI is a 12-character alphanumeric identifier. It's used in SAM.gov and other federal systems as a way to identify a unique entity. Registration with SAM.gov must be renewed annually. In SAM.gov, entities are given the choice to have their accounts set to public or private. Illinois Administrative Code is going to require grantees set their accounts to public. Why is this? A public registration means that when your registration is renewed annually, the updated registration expiration date will automatically update to your GATA portal. Remember, the GATA portal is the Illinois portal. This makes it easier for you to stay in pre-qualified status under this category. Public accounts are searchable and viewable by authenticated users such as DCO Technical Support Team and other administrative entities. This makes it easier to identify potential issues with your SAM.gov registration. Now, I do have to make the distinction that it's important to discern whether you're signing up for SAM.gov or registering for SAM.gov. Grantees are required to have a federal employer identification number known as a FEIN. This number is used to identify a business entity. The IRS provides a FEIN free of charge. FEIN applications are either submitted online, via fax, or via U.S. mail. Timeframes for receiving your FEIN will depend on the application method used. So an online application would be quicker than utilizing the mail-in form. Verification of the organization's FEIN will be confirmed automatically by GATA. Now, a grantee can be placed on something called FEIN lock for non-compliance, such as delinquent audit reports. FEIN lock means the grantee cannot execute or modify a grant agreement with DCO or receive grant funds from DCO without written and approved justification. Any grant disbursements made to the organization from the awarding agency will be halted until the locking reason is rectified. The Federal Excluded Parties List identifies entities excluded from receiving federal contracts, subcontracts, and other types of federal or non-federal financial assistance or benefits. Exclusions can also be referred to as suspensions or debarments. Grantees are placed on this list for non-compliance and will not be removed until certain conditions are met or until issues have been remedied. Organizations on this list are banned from doing business with any federal grant for an indefinite period. The Federal Excluded Parties list is something you can search on sam.gov. Next up, Illinois Secretary of State. So to do business with the state of Illinois, entities must be registered with the Illinois Secretary of State, and they must obtain a certificate of good standing. The certificate of good standing demonstrates that an entity is recognized by the state and it's in full compliance with state business regulations. The Secretary of State website has business resources to assist organizations in obtaining their certificate of good standing. Entities that must meet these requirements include corporations, not-for-profit corporations, limited partnerships, limited liability companies, and limited liability partnerships, as we can see on the slide there. Now, we are providing a link to the Secretary of State website in the chat. An important aspect of pre-qualification is this Illinois Stop Payment List. This list is comprised of entities that are found to be non-compliant with their agreement or grant policies. Organizations on the stop pay cannot receive grant funds. They cannot modify or execute any grant agreements with any state agency. Now, most of the time, grantees can remedy the non-compliance issue. They can be removed from the Illinois Stop Payment List. If that non-compliance issue is based on a moderately severe issue, then you're placed on the Illinois Stop Payment List in temporary status. However, if that issue is very serious or of a fraudulent nature, with due process, the grantee will be placed permanently on the Illinois Stop Payment List. Now, throughout all of these pre-qualification topics here, there is a help button located to the right, as we see on the screenshot here. If your organization is shown on the stop payment list, as we see on the slide they are, you can click the help button to identify the agency that placed you on the Illinois Stop Payment List. From there, you'll be given a contact to discuss remedying that issue. You may also contact the technical support team within the Office of Accountability for more information by emailing ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov. Another element to pre-qualification is the Illinois DHFS sanction list. That stands for the Department of Healthcare and Family Services. Now, they are the ones with the authority to impose sanctions on entities and individuals. So organizations on the Illinois DHFS sanction list are not eligible for Medicaid reimbursement. The sanction is a result of administrative action that's taken against an organization in question when found to be in violation of administrative rule, civil law, or criminal offense. Types of sanctions include suspension, termination, barment, or exclusion. All right, I know we've got a bit of a long presentation today, but stay with me here. So, writing the grant application. Now, before you begin writing your grant application, you need to review the criteria that's outlined in that Notice of Funding Opportunity. Grant applications are reviewed by a merit review committee, and they review it based on the 3 points as you see on the slide: need, capacity, and quality. The category need is what we'll be talking about first here. It identifies stakeholders, facts, and evidence that the grant application's proposal supports the program's purpose. You can demonstrate that your proposal is in alignment with the purpose of the grant program by documenting specific community information or distinct advantages to your potential project location. Documenting the purpose can include letters of support from stakeholders, and you can expound on these by outlining unique information and data points. For example, outlining specific community information can help relay a wide range of facts about the local population, business climate, and infrastructure. This can also include demographic data, health statistics, education levels, employment rates, housing conditions, and environmental factors. Capacity. Capacity covers the ability of an entity to execute the grant project according to the program requirements. Capacity can be documented and defined in multiple ways. For example, physical capacity can mean the entity's location, staffing levels, and/or equipment are capable of accomplishing the tasks necessary to complete the grant goals. Capacity can also pertain to the entity's experience level, i.e., the demonstrated ability of the entity's staff to achieve program goals. Next up, we've got quality. Quality entails the totality of features and characteristics of a service, project, or product that indicates the ability to satisfy the requirements of the grant program. Quality can be demonstrated through many facets, including a robust business plan and a detailed, clear, and responsible budget. Quality can be demonstrated in the context of the application by providing specific details that clearly outline the entity's abilities to complete the identified program goals. Quality is documented through demonstrated achievements. So basically, a quality application is a thorough, detailed, and concise one. In writing your application, it's important to demonstrate passion and knowledge of the program, but we encourage applicants to be cognizant of their use of jargon. What does this mean? Well, when discussing a topic that is well known to you, it can be easy to slip into verbiage or lingo that others may not be familiar with. This can include technical terms or acronyms. If introducing such language, it's important to provide definitions or explanations of those terms to make it clear to the reviewer what's being discussed. It's important to be descriptive and to explain the narrative clearly and thoroughly. You should assume that the person reading your application knows nothing about your organization or the project, so you'll explain key details of your program. Please remember to proofread or enlist a trusted source to edit your application. Not only will this ensure that you have covered every detail, but it will also help eliminate spelling or grammatical errors. Maintain objectivity when describing the project. For example, a sentence like, "This is an amazing opportunity for our well-deserving community," raises more questions than answers. I mean, how can one quantify the word amazing? And what evidence is there to support that the community is well-deserving? Applicants are encouraged to bolster their proposals by citing sources, facts, research, and studies. You can also reference past examples of similar programs that your entity has implemented and the documented benefits of their success. A common misstep in the grant application process is the failure to submit all required documents or submitting unsigned documents. The NOFO clearly identifies that documentation is needed to accompany your grant application. The documents are to be completed, signed, and submitted with your application in the location identified in Part D of the NOFO. Before the documents are submitted, double check that they contain the necessary and appropriate signatures. The program application is a separate document in the application package. This document is where applicants draft a narrative explaining their intended project. The program application is unique to each notice of funding opportunity. When completing the program application, use as much detail as possible in your narrative to seamlessly connect the dots between the project's objectives and your entity's ability to satisfy the requirements. Remember to refer to the application review criteria from the NOFO supplement to generate your answers. The program application will sometimes have a separate document attached that provides instructions on how to complete the program application. So please review these instructions thoroughly. The project application is just one of the program-specific documents that may be attached to your to a notice of funding opportunity supplement for the applicant to complete. So examples of some program-specific documents that you may see attached to a NOFO include support schedules, entity certifications, demographic disclosures, authorized designee certifications. These type of documents and disclosures, if required, will be found at the bottom of the program-specific NOFO website. While the program NOFO may require documents specific to the program's goals, like the program application or the various disclosures, there are standard documents that are applicable to every grant application. These documents will include, as we see on the slide here, the Uniform Grant Application, the Uniform Budget Template, the Mandatory Disclosure, and the Conflict of Interest Disclosure. So let's review these documents. The uniform application is a mandatory document. Its purpose is to collect entity identifying information and the applicant's proposed terms for the grant. The first page of the uniform application will be completed by the program staff and will be unable to be edited. The remainder is to be completed by the applicant. Identifying information includes the entity's UEI and the FEIN. The primary address is also required. The uniform application asks the applicant's primary contact information. The applicant contact information is split into two separate sections. One section asks for the primary contact. This will be the administrative or business staff representative. And the other section requires the program contact. This is for a representative of the program or project staff. Other necessary information to be included in this uniform application include the areas impacted by the project, the proposed term or timeline of the project, and the requested funding level for the project. The uniform application must be signed and certified by the entity's authorized representative. Now, the budget is the backbone of the proposal. The Uniform Budget Template is a Microsoft Excel workbook that's to be completed by the applicant. It's based on the project's proposed financial needs. Each grant opportunity will have its own budget with different categories listed therein. Please only use the budget that is posted with the opportunity. The budget template needs to align with the funding requests stated in the program application and the uniform grant application. When completing the required budget template, grantees have the chance to demonstrate proficiency at planning, spending, and execution of grant funds. It's important to take your time when completing the budget and reach out to the program contact identified in the NOFO to address any questions or concerns. To ensure accuracy, grantees may find it helpful to obtain quotes for goods and services. Acquiring quotes doesn't mean that a grantee should start spending funds before award approval and award reimbursement. The first tab in the budget template contains a detailed list of instructions. The second tab, Section A, as we have highlighted in the screenshot here, is a summary page. So it will auto-populate with the total of values entered in the subsequent tabs you see to the right of the Section A tab. Section A is locked to edits with the exception of the entity information at the top of the page. All other tabs should be completed individually within the budget template. A narrative should be composed by applicants in each utilized budget tab. The narrative provides detail on the need for each expense as well as the budget category that will be utilized in the project scope. These documents on the screen here are the mandatory disclosure and the conflict of interest disclosure. Let's take a moment and see what each of these does. So the mandatory disclosure requires a potential awardee disclose to the state awarding agency all violations of state or federal criminal law involving fraud, bribery, or gratuity violations. A conflict of interest disclosure is the requirement of an applicant to disclose any conflicting relationships within organizations' officers, directors, agents, employees, and/or their spouses or immediate family members who could use the position for a purpose that is or gives the appearance of being motivated by a desire for personal gain. As previously mentioned, application packages may require additional documents depending on the program. It's important to closely review the section of the NOFO that addresses what documents are to be included and how to find them. Once you've completed the pre-qualification requirements and the application documents, it's time to submit. Section D of the NOFO supplement will provide instructions on how to submit the application package, which is usually a submission link to upload your documents like shown on the slide here. Do not email the application to the program contact. No applications submitted via email will be reviewed. Please use the link provided in the NOFO by the application due date and time. The link to the application is embedded in the Notice of Funding Opportunity Supplement under Section D, Part 4, titled Submission Dates and Times. Applicants can hover over the link and click to access the application. The link for submitting is also listed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity page under Application Documents. So the next section is to capture the applicant's organizational information. Under applicant legal name, they'll enter the organization legal name followed by the employer identification number, the taxpayer identification number, the unique entity identifier, and the organization's address, including city, state, and zip code. Applicants will then be taken to the Smartsheet form for the grant application, and they'll be prompted here to check a box that confirms they understand they are pre-qualified. You see, there's also an option to review resources to learn about pre-qualification. From there, as we see on the slide, applicants will confirm their individual information, first and last name, phone number, email address. Next, applicants are to enter demographic information. A drop-down menu is available that applicants can choose from. It'll ask them such questions as have you had a grant with DCO in the last 5 years? The asterisks denote which fields are required. Applicants will be unable to submit if these fields are left blank. Applicants may elect to choose Prefer Not to Answer or NA for each question. Ensure that your system does not autofill inappropriate information in these fields. Now, it's time to upload the completed application materials. You'll need to click the checkboxes to ensure all documents have been uploaded. This checklist here serves as a final reminder to make sure you've included all documents. Files can be dragged and dropped into the box shown here, or you can click Browse Files to select files from your computer. You can upload up to 10 files. Applicants can add a project name. They can check the box shown here if they wish to receive a copy of the information they entered into the form. If so, an automated email will be sent for your records. Finally, don't forget to hit Submit, as we have highlighted here at the bottom of the screenshot. All right, so you've submitted your documents. What happens now? Well, once that grant application window closes, applications are processed via merit review. If you recall, the Part E of the Notice of Funding Opportunity demonstrates how grant opportunities are to be reviewed and the judging criteria. The Merit Review Committee, which is formed during the grant announcement and grant application window, is to contain no fewer than 3 members. In addition to the strength of their applications, these reviewers will assess whether applicants are registered in GATA, whether they're pre-qualified by the time they submitted the grant, whether the applicant is eligible, and whether the required documents have been included and signed appropriately. So the merit review process must be based entirely on the criteria outlined in the NOFO. This information is included in the NOFO to ensure transparency and to give applicants a full picture of how their application will be assessed. Applicants who receive the highest scores are those who have successfully demonstrated a full understanding of the grant program and what's required of them as a grantee. They will have produced a strong narrative that paints a clear picture of their plan, one that demonstrates both a detailed budget proposal and highlights their capacity to successfully implement and monitor the program. It's important to note that the merit review process can take months to complete. Some grant programs will collect only a dozen or so applications, whereas others can draw in the hundreds. So because of this, and because the review entails not only assessing the narrative, but also reviewing the eligibility of each individual applicant, this process takes time. Once the review process has concluded and awards have been determined, all applicants will be notified. This means whether you've been selected to receive that award or not, you will be contacted once the review is complete. Everyone's favorite part here, the award announcement. Applicants who have been selected for the award will be contacted via email with a Notice of State Award or NOSA. They're then instructed to access their GATA Grantee portal to accept the NOSA. This acceptance starts the development of a formal grant agreement. Now, a grant agreement is, of course, a contractual agreement between a grantor, the funding entity, and the grantee, the recipient of that grant funding. This document contains everything you need to know about your grant. This agreement outlines the parameters, requirements, and expectations of both the grantee and the grantor. The grant agreement is built upon the intent of the grant program. It's informed by factors that emerge within the grant application review process. Evaluation of risk assessments, organization structure, track record, these are the things that help build the foundation of the grant agreement. The process is intended to help identify and mitigate any potential issues. It's imperative that grantees thoroughly review their grant agreement and use it as a reference when implementing a grant program. So if for any reason somebody in your organization does not have the executed grant agreement on hand, just reach out to us and we will make sure to get that. It's very important to have that at all times. All right, tips and resources here. When you decide to apply for a grant, you should not wait until the last minute to get started. Grant applications can be lengthy and they require documentation, detailed information, budget proposals, and a concrete plan to support your objective. As we stated, do not submit application materials via email. On rare occasions, another format for submission, such as through the mail, may be required. Section D4 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity will dictate the method of document submission. As we said, most of DCO grants are submitted in Smartsheet format. The deadline outlined in a NOFO is a hard deadline. This means that if the deadline is October 31st, 2025 at 5 p.m., applications submitted at 5:01 will not be accepted. If the grant opportunity has a technical assistance session, it's important to attend that. If you are unable to attend a technical assistance session, you may want to watch that session's recording and review the assistance therein. You'll also probably have a slide deck that accompanies that technical assistance session, so seek out those resources. You want to start early because you want to leave enough time to have any questions answered by your program contact. You may not be the only one with that same question, so it may result in maybe a frequently asked question document or something else sent out to other potential applicants on that NOFO page, I should say, to clarify something. You want to make time to complete your application early. Don't rush the process. As we stated, you want to be as thorough and detailed as possible. So our team is happy to offer resources in multiple formats. We offer monthly virtual trainings for potential and current grantees. On the first Wednesday of the month, we'll take a closer look at pre-qualification and what it entails. Whether you've attended before or not, the training session serves as a starting point in the grant journey. On the third Wednesday of the month, our team provides a training on one of a rotating list of topics related to grants within DCEO. From audits to compliance, we take the time to review important facets of the grant process with aspiring grantees and are available to answer questions and provide resources. We host weekly office hours held virtually. This informational session invites potential and current grantees to join as we answer questions and share resources. Whether you have a question in mind or not, you're welcome to sit in and hear from others about their experience. We're also proud to offer you Grantee Resource page. It offers up-to-date information on the Grantee Resource page. So here you can review the upcoming grant opportunities, you can browse our video and training resources, and you can sign up for future training opportunities. Finally, the GATA Resources website has important items that explain the grant cycle process. So for assistance, please reach out to our help desk at ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and if anybody has any questions, you can put those in the chat. Okay, I do see, looks like one question there from Jill, and I want to thank Amber for providing the links and answering any questions here. The question from Jill pertains to a separate route of how a grant can come into being. So a grant either comes into being through, as we talked about today in detail, that notice of funding opportunity. That's where you're going out and seeking a potential opportunity for your entity and organization via our website, is how it goes most of the time. Jill made reference here to how does that differ when you work with your legislative team and receive a line item appropriation. I believe that is the question here. So as Amber states here, your grant manager is always going to be your best point of contact for those types of grants. I will say, as we talked about, the various forms that will need to be submitted, most of those, we talked about those uniform ones that go with any opportunity. Those are still applicable there. Just be careful and make sure, I would say number one thing, when your grant manager emails you the documents they want filled out or gives you a link to them, keep the budget that was with that opportunity with that opportunity. You don't want to use a budget, for example, the grocery initiative, as we saw on one of our slides here. You wouldn't use that when you go and submit your line item appropriation budget, because most of the time those line item ones are capital project and are going to have different categories when we look across the bottom of that Excel template for that budget. So always keep the program documents with it, and your grant manager in that instance, if you have a line item, is going to be reaching out to you via email. So make sure that you have an appropriate email for an individual. I know there's a lot of turnover in some agencies, some organizations and entities out there. Make sure your grant manager knows whoever is going to be taking over those documents. We don't want anybody to get lost in the shuffle on either end. So make sure that if somebody starts working on the project, that they turn over the documents and everything they have to that point to the other person in your organization, so that there's nobody questioning, well, has this been done or has this not been done? All right, does anybody have any other questions? Am I missing anybody here? Matt has a good question here. How do you come up with the numbers in the budget here? We recognize that it's still very early in the process here. We kind of don't want anybody to go ahead and have construction costs. Like, let's say you're doing a construction project, you may have design engineering that you want to get started as soon as possible. If you do want design engineering to be covered in the grant, it is advisable to wait until your grant manager reaches out and emails you and ask them, make sure, run it by them. Can I go ahead and start with design engineering now? A lot of the times you want that grant agreement to be fully executed before you have any expenditures. So that's something to watch very, very carefully here. I wouldn't advise anybody to get started and kind of jump the gun on that. So um, the best we can do here, reach out to multiple contractors, get a sense of ballpark. Ballpark figures are helpful at the beginning when you're filling out the budget here. As you progress deeper into the process, you may have an opportunity to go ahead and amend that budget slightly. Now, obviously, that first go around, you want to be as careful as you can, but we do recognize that there are changes and a lot of things that happen throughout the course of the months, especially when you're doing a larger project. So just know that it is more difficult to go ahead and get that budget changed after that grant is executed. So once everybody has signed on the dotted line there, it would require a grant modification. So when you're filling out that budget, do your homework on that to the best of your ability. Work with your grant manager there. Make sure you've explained the narrative insofar as what the funds are going to be used for, so that DCO will know, okay, well, this is part of it and this is not part of it here. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Just do the best you can there with the budget, Matt. And then will a recording be sent? Yes, we will be sending out a recording of this. I know at some points here we went a little fast and people may be like, oh, well, what does this do? What does this entail? Do know that you can reach out to ceo.granthelp@illinois.gov, and we will be able to talk in more detail with that. And if necessary, jump on a WebEx and walk you through it, or have your program manager or your grant manager go ahead and do that. I don't see any other questions. Thank you for jumping on today, everybody. And if not, we will see you next month for another rotating topic training. Stephanie asks a very good question here. Are costs able to be funded prior to award? That will depend on the grant. That is a rare instance, I will say, that you may have kind of prior incurred costs allowed. So that's why we always say reach out to your grant manager, be in constant contact with them. They are a great resource, and your answer there most of the time is going to be no. Then if you're doing kind of the other option there, as we talked about, the notice of funding opportunity, that will be listed in the notice of funding opportunity. So always read that very carefully. That some of them are 4 pages long, some of them are 16 pages long. So it just depends on that program there. But yeah, the prior award cost is something you definitely want to watch out for, because although all of our funds are reimbursable, you do want them to fall within that period of performance. You don't want anything outside that period of performance. Otherwise, your organization may end up paying for something that they didn't intend to pay for. So again, work with your program manager and your grant manager. Liam, yes, that is correct. Any prior costs that would be allowed are going to be situated in a section of the NOFO. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.